Hello and welcome once again to INSEAD's Leadercast series. I'm Charles Galenick, Dean of the Executive MBA. It's a pleasure to have with us today Todd Stitzer, the CEO of Cadbury. Mr. Stitzer, welcome.
Charles, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm wondering, how does a lawyer from Ivy League schools, from Harvard and Columbia, how does one end up to be the head of the world's largest confectionery company?
Well, it is an interesting journey. I mean, I went to Harvard and Columbia. I always wanted to do deals. I was fascinated by mergers and acquisitions and by all of the things that meant. And so I practiced law in a big Wall Street law firm. Did that for 5 or 6 years. Billed more hours than anybody in the firm for 3 years in a row. And my wife became pregnant with our first child. So we had instant lifestyle decision. I mean, is Todd going to work 24 hours a day, or is Todd going to be a participant in the family? So one of the clients I had worked with was Cadbury Schweppes. They were looking for an assistant general counsel. And I basically moved out of a Wall Street law firm into sort of leafy Connecticut. Worked in the law department, and it was a law department of basically two, myself and the general counsel. Had exposure to both the confectionery and beverages parts of the business. Did more M&A. After a while, the chief executive of the company, Dominic Cadbury, offered me the chance to actually do strategy and M&A probably 6 or 7 years later. And that was sort of my first adventure out of the law sort of practice world. And I did that. He asked me the proverbial, what do you want to do when you grow up, question. I said, I want to run one of the businesses. He said, you can't run one of the businesses if you haven't done sales and marketing. I said, okay, so give me a sales and marketing job. And I got a sales and marketing job back in America's Beverages, also as the head of strategy. So I kept doing M&A, but I also was responsible for 30 bright young marketing people. And so they taught me how to market.
So was this a major transformation when you went to line type of work?
I mean,
because you're in a highly technical profession, law, and all of a sudden now you have to manage people and compensation systems, structures, and everything else.
You do have to expand your mind. I mean, I became the head of the global beverages legal department before I did the strategy job. So I sort of had 30 lawyers around the world working for me, and so I sort of got my feet wet on compensation, motivation, all the things that you need as a sort of leader of a function, which isn't quite the same as a general manager, but in a smaller sort of a way it is. So I got a sense of that. Then I was put into a commercial function, so leading the marketing group. And again, that was a different challenge because marketing people are more individualistic and creative.
You're being polite, yes.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you had to learn how to really manage a lot of bright people and getting them moving in the same direction, while at the same time relating to the sales guys who were, reporting to you were a colleague of the sales guys, and there was always a healthy competition between, who gets to invest what in, what part of the financial balance sheet. So
jumping forward to 2008, now your law skills come back. Except it's not a merger and an acquisition, it's a demerger, which are relatively rare these days. I'm wondering about the cultural side, the organizational side of a demerger. Normally, finance and strategy lead the way in mergers, and then culturally you have to somehow make things work. What are the consequences, do you think? Obviously you haven't experienced this yet, but what might be some of the consequences for the culture in the organization, having Cadbury and Schweppes now split up?
Well, Cadbury and Schweppes were put together actually only 40 years ago. And in all of the time in my company, it was always Cadbury and Schweppes. I actually sold the business that I rolled up in the States, so it was sort of emotional for me. But I also had the chance to roll up the confectionery business. And in an interesting way, each culture, as it were, the beverages culture and the confectionery culture, have something that they can focus on and be proud of. I mean, I chose to lead the confectionery side because I'd sort of led the beverages side already. And I challenge people to be Big Purple. I mean, you have Big Red, Coke, you have Big Blue, IBM. Cadbury's sort of livery is purple. And so I sort of said, listen, I mean, we're the biggest confectionery company in the world. So let's be the biggest and the best, and let's think of ourselves as Big Purple. And there are just wonderful opportunities, and now there's no hiding. We have to make this business work as best as we can. And so the demerger was emotional in that you were separating and making life more uncertain on both sides, and yet there was also this great opportunity or objective that people could really and truly focus on for the first time in a long time. I mean, our confectionery business for many years was dependent on the cash flow of our beverages business. And so guess what? Now we don't have that cash flow. We have to generate that cash flow and dividends and earnings and the whole 9 yards out of a great business, but one that hadn't been challenged as much as it could have.
So I understand right now you're going through the beginnings of a cost reduction program. These are never easy to sell.
Yeah.
I haven't met a CEO yet who says,
Yeah.
easy cost reductions, people will accept it. What has been some of your internal messages? How have you communicated this to the managers, to the people in the organization? What are some of the ways in which you've said that this is the right thing for us to do?
We've actually been on a transforming journey since about 2003. So from 2004 to 2007, we closed or sold 25% of our global plant infrastructure, beverages and confectionery, and separated about 10% of our people. Our new confectionery plan is an additional 15% of our confectionery manufacturing configuration and an additional 15% of people. So the message to everyone is, and think about this is a Quaker company that's viewed as utopian and paternalistic. So not an easy sort of message to get across to people, but the very pragmatic business approach of saying, listen, I mean, if 80% of the people can travel well on this journey, and it takes difficult decisions about 20%, we have to make those decisions because our share owners are the people who are interested in the productivity of this business. And if we can't prove to them that we can't be productive, then we're not going to be able to control this journey. So it's really one of pragmatism. I mean, the challenge that I put to people is, listen, you guys all want, 50,000 people want a professional experience that generates financial security for them and their families. And there are 80,000 share owners who want at least double-digit returns on a consistent basis. So somehow you have to marry your desire for professional advancement and family financial security with the share owner's desire to have consistent earnings. So in order to do that, we have to make some tough decisions. And we're going to be fair, and we're going to be open and honest about that communication, and we're going to be sensitive to people and help them make that transition. But we have to do it, or we're not going to be in control of our own destiny.
Sure. And I've noticed that one of your core values, I think you have 5 or 6, the first one is performance.
Right.
Is this an aspiration, or is this something that's been part of the nearly 200-year Quaker history of Cadbury? Is this something you can leverage from the past, or is this something that has to come in with the new messaging?
The Cadburys, for all their Quaker background, were very firm and focused on making a profit. Their view was, listen, if you can't make a profit, you can't do good. And they connected, their view was doing good is good for business, but you have to do good business if you want to do good. I mean, it was this sort of push me, pull you of social responsibility that they uniquely invented in the 1800s. And we characterize it today as performance-driven, values-led. I mean, we have the values of integrity and responsibility, but we also know that if we don't perform, we're not going to be able to affect the things that we would like to affect from a community perspective.
Sure. My kids, by the way, think you do a lot of good already in just providing chocolate and candy. They have no problem with that. In fact, they were saying to me, I wish you were working for Cadbury's dad, because our life would be more interesting. Which gets me to the issue of talent wars. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of talk of talent wars, and many companies have made claims that they can't find enough good, strong, talented people to rise to the ranks and promote and be executives. Do you face talent wars in Cadbury's?
We absolutely do. I mean, there is a talent war out there. We seek to compete in the talent war by obviously having the right compensation packages, but more importantly by having the right employment experiences and the right employment environment. I mean, we try to create a Cadbury brand that differentiates itself from other sort of more monolithic global companies. I mean, we're very personal. We give people lots of responsibility at an early age. We aren't particularly overstaffed. We pay well, but we give people responsibility. I mean, I would cite my own journey through Cadbury Schweppes as, I started in the law department and I've been all over the place because I was willing and the company was willing to experiment and give responsibility, and we still do that to this day. We also have, a pretty dynamic culture. I mean, over the last 5 years, about 30% of our top 150 people have changed so that we get the right mix of new ideas and old success to create a sort of dynamic approach. So, the talent wars are out there, but the brands that we have, the heritage that we have, and the responsibility that we give, we think differentiates us.
On the issue of the top 200, or let's say the top 500 in the firm, I'm wondering what type of leadership traits or characteristics you find are particularly important within Cadbury's. There are dozens and dozens of leadership traits and characteristics.
Sure.
And there's all sorts of claims about which ones actually drive better performing managers and so on. But what 2 or 3 do you think are essential to being an effective leader within Cadbury's, and why, perhaps?
I won't cite the specific words, but I'll describe the characteristics. I mean, I think I look for people who are selfless and highly engaged, meaning they're willing to work very hard for a goal, and they love accomplishment. So the combination of both desire to accomplish and willingness to invest in accomplishment in a way that is relatively egoless is crucial. I mean, authority, you have to earn authority in life. You can't tell people what to do. So you need leaders who actually earn authority from their colleagues by them setting an example of hard work, intelligence, creativity, real engagement and collaboration. They sort of get people to follow them by their example. I mean, a very thoughtful example. So, I mean, it's not just a sort of natural quality. You have to be purposeful about your leadership style and the environment you create. But it needs to be egoless. It needs to be selfless. It needs to be very, very purposeful. That's the kind of people that I'm looking. And you have to be smart. I mean, you have to be smart. You don't have to be a genius, but you have to be smart, and you have to be sort of egoless and incredibly hardworking. And I think that those things just allow other people to contribute. I mean, I love having smart people around me. I'm not the smartest person in the world. I try to find as many smart people as I can and convince them to work together to a certain set of priorities. I mean, and they do it. But if you assemble them and focus them, and they have the right qualities, it gets done because they want to accomplish things.
Now, I assume that the demerger has not left you with more time on your hands. You probably have as busy life as you've had in the past. But what are some of the things that you do to try to balance out the CEO life and your own private life and hobbies and creativity?
It is a huge challenge because people who have high degrees of responsibility are highly engaged and they work really, really hard. And I found for myself that you have to narrow your focus. And it's basically, at this point for me and my family, it's wife and work. My children are both in university. In fact, my son is graduating in a week from Harvard, and he's on his way. My daughter is a teacher in Boston. So my wife and I have been married for 31 years, and we've lived through everything. We've lived through 5, 6, 7 moves in short order with our kids. So it's important for me to make sure that my wife stays on side and is feeling as good about me as I feel about her. And so I try very hard wherever I am in the world to get home on Friday night or Saturday morning, and I try not to do any business until Sunday after church. I let her be the leader on the weekends. I mean, she's a bright and tremendously bubbly person who's got lots of interests. I say, listen, you lead on the weekends. You decide what we're going to do, and whatever you want to do, we'll do it. We're not going to. I don't try to sort of seek the sort of business social circuit. I mean, I'm not interested in going out to dinner every night of the week and the weekend with a whole bunch of business people or people who, maybe, I don't know, sort of name people. I mean, I just, it's very important to separate yourself and create a life that is separate from business. And it's something that's precious that will be with you for long after you're finished with business. And if you don't purposefully think about managing that and husbanding it and just keeping it, that's crucial. So you just can't get so carried away with everything you do that you forget about the people who love you and are part of your family. And for me, that's meant choices. I don't play golf on Saturday mornings with the boys. I don't do certain things that maybe I would have done with my wife separately long ago before we had children. I mean, it's very important. So I would say you have to be really purposeful about making sure those who are with you through the journey are with you at the end, because when the journey's over, you're going to be a pretty lonely person.
Great. Thank you once again.
You
Thank
bet.
you for joining us.
No, I'm delightful. Thanks.